Alright, so these are the OEM parts that you're going to need, or it's not really needed, but it's highly recommended. So the top three over here are the oil seals, and if your transmission has a lot of miles on them, it's highly recommended to replace those because you do not want an oil leak. That'll cause your transmission to blow up if the oil drops too low. These two are the bearings. One goes on the main shaft, one goes on the counter shaft. The other two on the bottom, I didn't really want to replace it, mainly because the only reason I'm replacing these two is because I need to pull them off using the press. So when you're pulling them off, it's going to cause them to deform a little bit. That's why I got these two. And this right here is a speed sensor spacer. There you go. It goes on the speed sensor so it doesn't hit the gears. Looks like that. These are all the seals. And this last item is very important. This is the bolt that goes on top of the countershaft. Now, when I first rebuilt my transmission, I reused the bolt. I did not know you have to replace it, and the transmission basically locked up because that bolt came loose. So these are a one-time use, and if you really do want to reuse it, make sure you use plenty of Loctite Red, just so it doesn't pop out. So there you go. I'm going to be using Loctite Red just in case, just because my transmission blew up once, or locked up once, I don't want anyone else's to lock up. So, highly recommending using Loctite. Alright, so this is the countershaft. All the gears are off. And the countershaft does take a lot more force than the main shaft to get the gears off. Mainly because there's no needle bearings on the top. And these are all held in by friction. So as you can see, it's a little bit worn, but it should be fine. I'm going to measure the clearances afterwards, see if they're good to reuse. Hopefully they are. Anyways, everything just slides out. This synchro hub right here, the way you orient it is, see that negative sign? It's supposed to face down. So there's that. And I'm just going to replace the synchros right now. Alright, so once again, make sure you don't forget the synchro springs when putting them back. They just snap right on. And that's to help your shifter stay in place. So basically, all you gotta do at this point is just drop everything in. And and make sure you use plenty of lube. So I have a water cap full of manual transmission fluid, and I use that as lube because you're gonna need a lot during this process. So I lubed up the shaft, the gears, the synchros, the contact point, everything. It helps everything go back in together, especially when you press it back, because you're going to want to reduce the friction so it doesn't wear out the teeth on the gear, or sorry, the shaft. Alright, I don't know if you can tell, but there are two teeth here that are a little bit thicker, or a little bit, come out a little more than the others. And they're supposed to go into these grooves over here, if you can tell. So make sure you get those aligned, otherwise you're not going to be able to put them in. So it should slide right on, just like that. Okay, so far I got the first gear on, second and third. Still needs to be pressed on. As you can see, it's not in all the way, but I've replaced the synchros already, and pretty much I'm just following the guide right here. Hold on, lower the brightness a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to be posting this in the description. This is Honda's official guide, so it gives a detailed breakdown of all the components, how it goes, etc. So you can use that to tell which pieces go where. So all I'm missing is to press these on and then do let's see, 4th gear, 5th, 6th, and then we're good to measure the clearances and then put it all back together. So these are the old gears and this is the gear X. Alright, so this is the last step. This is getting the bearing on. I changed it to a new bearing just because the old one seemed a little worn out. So what you're going to need is a feeler gauge, and the clearances should be between 0.04 millimeters and 0.1 0.01 millimeters. So I got 0.04 over here. I'm gonna put it in between the bearing and the shim, and then just press it down until that's the clearance, and then pull it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then the countershaft will be finished. Alright, now that it's done, it should look a little something like this. And what's this? Second gear should spin freely, and so with the first gear. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but bottom spins. So that's how you know you're done. And then now we need to put it back on the vise, and then get that bolt on. Alright, so one way you can check if you've done everything correct is put the shafts onto each other like this. So as you can see, they all should be perfectly aligned, and all the gears should be meshing. Alright, now what I'm doing right now is I'm cleaning the threads on the inside of the countershaft, just so the thread lock can bond to the actual metal surface. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that out with some brake cleaner along with the bolt, and then got my Loctite red over here. Get out. That's what I'm going to be using. It's good stuff. Alright, so on the left, that's the new bolt. The one on the right is the old one. And here's the part number, in case you don't have it. No ISO. There we go. And of course, thread lock red. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on now. So same as before, reverse threads. So first gonna bolt it in by hand, and then afterwards torque it down. Now the torque specs for this is 87 foot-pounds. I already have that set on my torque wrench. Here's that bit. 87 foot-pounds. Alright, so right now I'm cleaning the edge of the case just so the RTV will bond better. I'm using one of the Scotch Brite pads, and all I'm doing is just scrubbing the old RTV off, and then I'm going to be using a whole new bead and then put it back on. So I replaced all the seals, and I've cleaned the edge of the case so the RTV will stick better and it won't leak. So both halves are done, brand new seals. I'm reusing the bearings because I didn't touch them at all, so they don't seem too damaged. And what I did here was I taped up the main shaft so the splines won't damage the seal. And I'm going to be using some manual transmission fluid as lube, just so it slides in easier. And I'm going to put those on, put the shifter assembly on, or I'm in the shifter forks. And then after that I'm going to do a whole bead of RTV around. And RTV I have here is called The Right Stuff by Permatex. This is some really good stuff. Pretty much going to go around, put the case back, torque it down, let it dry, and then the transmission should be ready to put back on the car. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to be showing the process of putting the whole thing back. So right now I'm just going to get this on the cart, and then I'll continue the video. So when you have everything back together, you're going to notice that this reverse arm is going to be hitting the gear slightly. So you're going to have to sand it down just so it clears. So the main reason why our cars grind in reverse when it's not at a complete stop is because they use a third gear to change the direction of the shaft. So there's no synchros on this. If it's spinning, it's not going to go in all the way. So that's the main reason why. Alright, so after you put the case on, what you got to do is separate that snap ring and then put it over the bearing. and when you turn the whole case over upside down, that whole shaft's going to shift up and it's going to lock into place. So you'll hear it click, and then the snap ring will lock into the groove on the bearing. And then now we need to put the sensor back, the top cap back, and then the shifter assembly. So you want to use RTV around this bolt and the sensor, and then just screw it back in where it belongs. Alright, so you can see I have the RTV on the sensor and on this one cap up here. And you're just going to want to screw it on like it's a normal bolt. I'll torque that down later. So, same as before, don't be afraid to use a good amount of RTV, but don't overdo it. I mean, it's fine if you do, because it's just going to squeeze out the edges anyways. And then you're going to want to put this bolt back. This is what holds the the reverse gear in place. And then, let's see, there's one more bolt. This is where the speed sensor goes. This is where that the hex bolt that secures the shifter goes. You're going to need to use RTV on this one also. So, along with the whole shifter assembly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape off all the old RTV, sand it down a little bit, maybe using like a green Scotch-Brite pad, and then go ahead and put the RTV on. And as you can see, I've saved the balls and the springs, so they go up top. Just one ball in each, and then put the spring in. And you want to replace the crush washer, but I don't have crush washers right now, so I'm just going to reuse them. They seem fine. They didn't really deform much, so I'm going to go ahead and put them in and then torque them down. Also, as I said before, I put a nut in here. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just wiggling it, prying it a little bit, and then the nut should come right off, just like that. It's a 14mm nut. All right, now I'm gonna be putting RTV on the shifter assembly, shifter arm, and then putting the whole thing on. All right, so I've torqued everything down to the torque specs. Basically, all I gotta do is put this back in the car, fill it up with fluid, and it's good to go. And I've already put the speed sensor spacer on. It's a little thing right there. Right, so it's a pretty smooth shifting. It's first, second, and then third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then, whoops, sorry, that's reverse. It's right here, reverse. So, there we go. This is Gear X 1/4 with the Synchrotech Synchro rebuild, and it's officially done.